The fluorescent glow of Ella's diner sign buzzed quietly in the humid air, casting a faint reflection on the rain-slicked pavement. Inside, the diner hummed with an easy rhythm, plates clinking, forks scraping against ceramic, and the occasional ding of the kitchen bell. Marcus wiped down the counter, his eyes flicking to the clock. It read 10:17 p.m., and his shift had another long stretch to go. At 26, Marcus was no stranger to the late shift, balancing his work with a side hustle, making custom sneakers, and the constant churn of dreams that always felt just out of reach. Tonight, though, the usual crowd seemed quieter. A couple of regulars sat in their usual booths, nursing coffee refills like they had nowhere else to be. Table 4 is ready for pickup. May, the head cook, called over the noise. Marcus nodded, grabbing the steaming plate of waffles and eggs before weaving through the narrow aisle. It was then, as the front door jingled open, that Marcus noticed him. The man who entered was older, perhaps in his mid-50s, with salt and pepper hair and an air of exhaustion that clung to him like the damp evening air. He maneuvered a wheelchair with steady precision, his face tight with concentration. The diner went still for a brief moment, some heads turning before returning to their meals. Marcus approached with his practiced smile. "Good evening, sir. Would you prefer a table or a booth?" "A table, please," the man replied, his voice steady yet weary. Marcus guided him to a spot near the window where the streetlights cast a pale glow over the rain outside. "Take your time with the menu. Let me know when you're ready," Marcus said, setting the laminated list before stepping away. Even as he attended to other tables, his eyes kept drifting back to the man by the window. There was something about the way he stared at his hands resting on the table, as though weighing their worth, that tugged at Marcus's attention. But the diner didn't leave much room for daydreaming. May's call from the kitchen jolted him back to the task at hand. By the time Marcus returned to take the man's order, the slight tension in his brow seemed to have eased. "I'll have the grilled chicken sandwich," the man said, folding the menu, "and coffee black." "Coming right up," Marcus replied, jotting it down before heading to the kitchen. As the man waited, he seemed to fade into the background noise of the diner. To everyone else, he was just another customer. But to Marcus, there was something different about him, though he couldn't quite put his finger on it. The smell of fresh coffee and sizzling chicken filled the air as Marcus carried the plate and steaming mug to the man's table. He placed them carefully, offering a warm smile. "Here you go. If you need anything else, just wave me over," Marcus said. The man nodded, giving a small appreciative smile before focusing on his food. Marcus turned to leave but hesitated when he saw the man fumbling slightly with his utensils. His hands, weathered and unsteady, struggled to maintain a firm grip on the fork. Marcus watched discreetly for a moment, conflicted. He didn't want to embarrass the man, but something in him couldn't just walk away. A split-second decision took over. "Excuse me, sir," Marcus began gently. "Would you like a little help with that?" The man froze, his fork hovering midair. His eyes darted up to meet Marcus's, searching for any hint of pity or judgment. What he found instead was sincerity. I don't want to trouble you," the man said cautiously. "It's no trouble at all," Marcus assured him, sliding into the seat across the table. He reached for the sandwich, cutting it into smaller, manageable pieces before setting it back on the plate. "There you go. Let me know if I can do anything else." The man's expression softened. "Thank you. It's not every day someone goes out of their way like this." Marcus shrugged, trying to play it off. "It's just part of the job, you know, making sure people leave happy." The man smiled faintly and took a bite of the sandwich. His hands were now steady enough to manage. For a while, they sat in comfortable silence, Marcus occasionally glancing toward the kitchen to make sure May wasn't giving him the side eye for sitting down on the job. "You're not from around here, are you?" Marcus asked, eventually breaking the quiet. He hadn't seen the man in the diner before, and most of their customers were locals. The man shook his head. "No, just passing through." I was in town for some meetings and decided to stay an extra day to clear my head. Meetings, huh? Business. Marcus leaned back slightly, curious but cautious not to pry. Something like that, the man replied cryptically, sipping his coffee. Name's Ben, by the way. Nice to meet you, Ben. I'm Marcus, Marcus said. Marcus, Ben repeated, as if testing the name on his tongue. You've got good instincts, Marcus. Most people would have just walked away. Marcus chuckled nervously. Well, I don't like to see people struggle when I can help. Guess it's just how I was raised. Ben's eyes lingered on Marcus for a moment, a look of quiet contemplation crossing his face. Then, as if deciding against saying more, he returned to his meal. Marcus stood, sensing the conversation had run its course. I'll let you enjoy your food. Just holler if you need anything. As Marcus returned to the counter, he couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just another customer passing through. Something about Ben felt significant, though he couldn't explain why. From the corner of his eye, he noticed Ben watching him as he moved between tables, refilling coffee cups and clearing plates. The man wasn't staring, just observing, like someone quietly taking mental notes. The diner was winding down for the night, but Marcus's mind was far from slowing. He kept glancing toward Ben's table, catching snippets of the man's pensive demeanor. It wasn't pity Marcus felt. It was curiosity, mixed with an unshakable sense of responsibility. When Marcus noticed Ben struggling to lift a coffee mug for another sip, he acted without hesitation. Approaching the table, he knelt slightly to meet Ben's eye level. Would you like me to refill that for you, or maybe bring a straw? Marcus asked gently. Ben hesitated for a moment, then nodded. A straw would be great. Thank you. As Marcus retrieved the straw and handed it over, Ben's lips curved into a small smile. You're very observant, Marcus. That's not something you can teach. I guess I just try to pay attention, Marcus replied, shrugging. You'd be surprised how much people say without saying anything. Ben let out a soft chuckle, sipping his coffee through the straw. Wise words for someone so young. I get that a lot, Marcus said, grinning. But honestly, I've just been through enough to know when someone could use a little help. Ben's eyes flickered with recognition, as though Marcus's words had peeled back a layer he hadn't expected. He set the coffee down carefully and leaned back in his chair, his hands resting on the table. I've been on the receiving end of kindness a few times, Ben said quietly, but it's been a while since it felt as genuine. Marcus sat down across from him, unbothered by the curious glances from the other diners. If you don't mind me asking, what brought you to Ella's tonight? I mean, of all the places you could have gone. Ben's gaze shifted to the window, where the rain continued to drizzle under the orange glow of the streetlights. I wasn't planning to come here, honestly. Just driving through, saw the sign, thought I'd stop for some coffee, maybe clear my head. Sounds like there's more to that story, Marcus said, his tone inviting but not pushy. Ben smirked faintly. You could say that. Let's just say I've had some decisions to make lately. Big ones. And the weight of them has been heavier than I expected. Marcus nodded, letting the man take his time. He wasn't one to press for details. He'd learned long ago that people would share when they were ready. Instead, he changed the subject. So what do you do, Ben? For work, For a moment, Ben seemed to weigh his answer. I've dabbled in a few things over the years. These days, I mostly help people connect the dots in their lives. Show them how to reach their full potential. Sounds important, Marcus said, genuinely impressed. You must meet a lot of interesting people. I do, Ben replied, his voice carrying a note of wistfulness. But meeting people like you reminds me that it's not always about the big movers and shakers. Sometimes, the smallest acts leave the biggest impressions. Marcus wasn't sure how to respond to that. He felt the weight of Ben's words settle over him, grounding him in a way that was both humbling and affirming. Before Marcus could say more, May's voice cut through the quiet. Marcus, the back stacking up. Need you for dishes. Marcus stood quickly. Duty calls. You good for now, Ben? Ben smiled warmly. I am. Thanks again. As Marcus walked back toward the kitchen, he glanced over his shoulder one last time. Ben was still sitting there, looking out the window, his expression thoughtful and unreadable. It wasn't until much later that Marcus realized that single act of kindness would set off a chain of events he could never have imagined. The diner had emptied out significantly by the time Marcus returned from the kitchen, drying his hands on a towel. Ben was still seated by the window, his plate empty and his coffee cup pushed slightly aside. The rain outside had slowed to a mist, and the soft glow of the streetlights made the diner feel like a tiny oasis in the quiet night. Marcus grabbed the coffee pot and walked over. Still good for a top-up, or are you all coffeeed out? Ben looked up and smiled faintly. One more won't hurt. Marcus poured the coffee, the warm aroma briefly filling the air between them. He was about to turn back to the counter when Ben spoke again, his voice softer this time. You ever feel like the universe throws people in your path for a reason? Ben asked, almost as if thinking out loud. Marcus paused, his curiosity piqued. I guess I've thought about it. Why do you ask? Ben leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on the table. Because I didn't expect to end up here tonight. Didn't expect to meet someone like you. Marcus raised an eyebrow, pulling a chair over to sit across from him. You're making me curious now, Ben. What's your story? Ben chuckled, shaking his head slightly. It's a long one. You sure you've got time? Marcus gestured to the nearly empty diner. Plenty. Ben took a deep breath, his gaze dropping to his hands. I wasn't always in this chair, you know. 10 years ago, I was a different man. Married, working as an art dealer in Los Angeles, traveling the world, living what I thought was a dream. What happened? Marcus asked, his voice careful not to intrude. A car accident, Ben said bluntly but not bitterly. Driver. Marcus felt a pang of humility. Sounds like you've been through a lot, but it also sounds like you've made a real difference. Ben smiled, his eyes glinting with quiet determination. Maybe, but the way I see it, there's always more to do. Always someone else who could use a little kindness. The weight of Ben's words settled between them, creating an unspoken understanding. Marcus felt a mix of admiration and anticipation, like this conversation was leading somewhere bigger than either of them realized. The diner was almost empty now. The hum of the coffee machine was the only sound filling the quiet space. Marcus returned to his usual duties, clearing tables and wiping counters. But his mind kept drifting back to Ben. Something about the man's story felt unfinished, like there was more he wasn't saying. As Marcus refilled a napkin dispenser near Ben's table, the older man spoke again. Marcus, Ben said, his tone steady but deliberate. Can I ask you something? Marcus turned, intrigued. Of course. Why do you do this? Working here. Helping people like me without a second thought. You strike me as someone who could be doing a lot more. Marcus chuckled lightly, leaning against the booth. It's not as noble as you think. I'm just trying to make ends meet. This job keeps the lights on while I figure out the rest. The rest? Ben asked, tilting his head. Yeah, Marcus admitted. I've got dreams, like everyone else. I want to start my own sneaker business someday. Custom designs, something unique. But dreams don't pay the bills, so here I am. Ben studied him for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Finally, he leaned forward, resting his forearms on the table. What if I told you I could help with that? Ben said, his voice calm but heavy with meaning. Marcus blinked, caught off guard. Help how? Ben smiled faintly, reaching into the messenger bag, slung over the back of his wheelchair. He pulled out a thick folder and slid it across the table. Take a look. Marcus hesitated, then opened the folder. Inside were photos of vibrant community centers, detailed plans for art programs, and testimonials from people whose lives had been transformed. At the center of it all was a foundation, Ben's foundation, dedicated to uplifting underserved communities through art, mentorship, and entrepreneurship. This is what I do now, Ben explained. I use my resources to create opportunities for people who deserve a shot. People like you. Marcus stared at the folder, his mind racing. Why me? We just met. Ben's expression softened. Because I see something in you, Marcus. The way you notice me struggling. The way you help without hesitation. That's rare, and it's exactly what I look for in the people I work with. Marcus shook his head, overwhelmed. I don't know, Ben. This is a lot. I'm just a guy trying to get by. You're more than that, Ben said firmly. You've got heart, and that's something you can't teach. I've been looking for someone to help me expand this foundation, to lead new initiatives. I think you're that person. The weight of Ben's words settled over Marcus, leaving him momentarily speechless. He glanced back at the folder, his fingers brushing over the photos. This is real, Marcus asked, his voice barely above a whisper. It's real, Ben confirmed. But you don't have to decide right now. Take the night to think about it. If you're interested, meet me here tomorrow at noon and we'll talk details. Marcus closed the folder carefully, his heart pounding. He didn't know what to say, didn't even know how to process what was happening. All he could manage was a quiet, thank you. Ben smiled, his eyes warm with understanding. Thank you, Marcus, for reminding me why I do this. As Marcus watched Ben wheel himself toward the door, a strange mix of emotions surged within him. Gratitude, disbelief, and a flicker of hope he hadn't felt in years. The following morning felt surreal. Marcus had hardly slept, his mind racing with possibilities and doubts. The folder Ben had left with him sat on his kitchen table, its contents spread out like a puzzle begging to be solved. He read through the documents again, his fingers tracing over the images of smiling faces, bustling workshops, and thriving communities. Could this really be his chance to make a difference, not just for himself, but for others? By noon, Marcus found himself back at Ella's diner, seated at the same table where Ben had sat the night before. The diner was quieter in the daylight, and Marcus felt the weight of the moment pressing down on him. His palms were damp, and he kept fidgeting with the corner of the folder. The jingling of the doorbell snapped him out of his thoughts. Ben rolled in, his demeanor calm and collected, as if this meeting was just another step in a well-laid plan. He wheeled over to Marcus's table and offered a warm smile. Good to see you again, Ben said, parking his wheelchair beside the booth. How are you feeling? Marcus let out a nervous chuckle. Honestly, a little overwhelmed. This is a lot to take in. Ben nodded, his expression understanding. I get it. Opportunities like this don't come around every day. But I wouldn't have offered it if I didn't think you were the right person. Marcus glanced down at the folder, then back at Ben. Why me, though? I'm just a waiter trying to get by. What makes you think I can do this? Because you already have what it takes, Ben said, his voice steady. Compassion, leadership, the ability to see people. Really see them and make them feel valued. That's not something you can learn in a classroom. It's something you carry in your soul. The sincerity in Ben's words hit Marcus harder than he expected. He'd spent so much of his life feeling overlooked, like his dreams were too far out of reach. But here was someone who saw him differently, someone who believed in him. So what would this look like? Marcus asked, his voice tentative but curious. Ben leaned forward, his eyes lighting up with excitement. You'd start as a program leader, working with communities to develop initiatives that align with your passions. We'd fund your sneaker business as part of a mentorship program, showing others how to turn their ideas into reality. You'd also help organize workshops and events, using your story to inspire others. Marcus's breath caught. You're serious? You'd help me start my own business. Absolutely, Ben said with a smile. Because it's not just about creating something for yourself. It's about showing others what's possible. You've got the drive and the vision. I'll help you with the resources and guidance to make it happen. For a moment, Marcus couldn't speak. The dream he'd clung to for years. the one he'd always assumed was too big to achieve, suddenly felt within reach. "I don't know what to say," Marcus admitted, his voice thick with emotion. "Say yes," Ben said simply. "Say yes, and let's change some lives together." Marcus looked down at the folder one last time, the weight of the decision settling over him. Then, with a deep breath, he looked up at Ben and extended his hand. "Yes," Marcus said firmly. "Let's do this." Ben's smile widened as he shook Marcus's hand. "Welcome to the team." In the weeks that followed, Marcus's life transformed in ways he could never have imagined. The diner became a chapter in his story, not the whole book. With Ben's guidance, Marcus launched his sneaker business and led community programs that empowered others to chase their dreams. Together, they proved that even the smallest acts of kindness could ripple outward, creating waves of change. Months later, Marcus stood in the middle of a packed community center in Memphis, Tennessee, surrounded by laughter, chatter, and the unmistakable energy of hope. The center, once an abandoned building on a neglected corner, had been transformed into a vibrant hub of creativity and learning. Bright murals adorned the walls, artwork created by local kids under the guidance of volunteer artists. Marcus watched as a group of teens worked on customizing sneakers at one of the workshop tables. He recognized himself in their focused expressions, their cautious optimism. This was his dream brought to life, and it was bigger than he'd ever imagined. Ben wheeled up beside him, his face glowing with pride. "Looks like you're a natural," he said, nodding toward the workshop. Marcus grinned. "It's surreal. I never thought I'd be here doing this." "You earned it," Ben said. "Every bit of it." Marcus glanced around the room, taking it all in. The community center was more than just a building. It was a symbol of what was possible when people came together. Programs ranged from art therapy sessions and business mentorship to free meals for families in need. At the heart of it all was Marcus, whose journey from a diner waiter to a community leader had inspired so many. A young boy approached Marcus, holding up a pair of sneakers he'd just finished designing. "Mr. Marcus, what do you think?" he asked, his voice tinged with excitement. Marcus knelt down, examining the shoes. "These are fire," he said, smiling. "You've got a real talent, kid. Keep at it." The boy beamed, running back to his table to show his friends. Marcus stood, his chest swelling with pride. "It's moments like that," Ben said quietly, "that remind us why we do this." Marcus nodded, scanning the room. "You were right, Ben. Kindness. It changes everything." Ben smiled knowingly. "And it's contagious." As the afternoon wore on, Marcus reflected on how far he'd come. The night at Ella's diner felt like a lifetime ago, but he knew it was the foundation for everything that followed. A simple act of compassion, helping a man eat his meal, had set off a chain of events that transformed not only his own life but countless others. Looking around the bustling center, Marcus felt a deep sense of gratitude for Ben, for the people who believed in him, and for the chance to do the same for others. In the back of the room, a banner hung proudly on the wall. "Kindness starts here." Beneath it, the faces of the community, young and old, from all walks of life, formed a living testament to its truth. Marcus smiled, his heart full. The ripple of one small act had grown into a wave, and he was ready to see how far it could reach.